We just experienced the monks and sisters of Plum Village in France celebrating Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva. Avalokiteshvara is the Sanskrit name of this important symbol of mercy and compassion. He or she is present in all versions of Buddhism, although under many names and of either gender. In India, he is manifest as male. In East Asia, she is female, known in Japan as Kannon and Guanyin in China. This gender dualism is suggested by the paired statues behind me. I've never decided which gender is which. Thank you for joining me today. I will light the flaming chalice to recognize our gathering as Unitarian Universalists and also acknowledge the indebtedness that Unitarian Universalists have to many faith traditions, and this is a Buddhist example. And there's a great deal of Buddhism in traditional celebration of Unitarian Universalism, in case you hadn't noticed. Today, we'll note a few of the key elements involved in the practice of Zen Buddhism that contribute to personal development and touch on their relevance to extending Buddhist practice beyond focus on the self to include a capacity to engage in the work of community and social improvement. The most important element of Zen practice is to be truly, actively here, this moment, and this moment, and this moment, to be aware in your body, in this place, in space, in each moment of time. Of course, already you are here, right now, right where you are. But our wandering minds seem to take us back in time as memories or ahead into the future as plans or fantasies. But in each case, our thoughts of past events or of future plans actually occur right now. The focus of our awareness then often masquerades as a time traveler and distracts the attention to somewhere else rather than here and now. The present moment is the only real experience one can have. Since past memories and future memories are always experienced in the present, bringing them to mind provides an opportunity to contemplate their relevance to us right now in the present. The aim of Zen practice, of the mindful way of being, is to deepen our capacity to maintain a quiet, full awareness of what it is that is going on inside our own mind and body, while also being aware of what is going on around one. This is attention that is open and aware attention. Such an aware person is not talking all the time. Such an aware person is not always busy. Such a person may talk and be active, but in each case, the talking or the acting is always accompanied by a full awareness that one is talking and one is acting, and aware that there are impacts of that talk on another person or that action is affecting other people. That awareness is critical to it. It is that continuing wide scope of gentle awareness that constitutes mindfulness. Listen to what Thich Nhat Hanh discusses as he discusses mindfulness.
The practice of Buddhist meditation is to generate three kinds of energy. The first kind of energy is smriti, means mindfulness. The second is samadhi, concentration. And the third is prajna, insight. Mindfulness is to be aware of what is going on. And everyone is capable of being mindful. When you breathe in, and if you know that you are breathing in, that is called mindfulness of breathing. When you drink your tea, and if you are aware that you are drinking your tea, that is called mindfulness of drinking. And when you make a step, and if you are aware that you are making a step, that is mindfulness of walking. Mindfulness is always mindfulness of something. When you are angry, and if you know that you are angry, that's mindfulness of anger. Mindfulness of anger put you in a safer position. If you are angry, and if you are not mindful that you are angry, the situation is more dangerous. So mindfulness of sadness, mindfulness of joy, mindfulness of anger, mindfulness of drinking, mindfulness of walking, mindfulness of breathing, mindfulness of cooking. Mindfulness can be practiced at every moment of your daily life. And by that, you cultivate the energy of mindfulness. And the energy of mindfulness is the energy that can bring about the energy of concentration. When you are mindful of something, like this flower, breathing in, I know that the flower is there. I'm mindful of the presence of flower. And if I keep my mindfulness alive, and then I will be concentrated on the object of mindfulness, I can be fully concentrated on the object of mindfulness. And I can concentrate as long as I like. So cultivating mindfulness, you begin to concentrate your concentration. And when your mindfulness and concentration are powerful enough, you touch things deeply and you discover their nature, their insight. And when you have an insight, your insight is a liberating factor. It will liberate you from your anger, your fear, your despair. Without mindfulness, there is no concentration and there is no insight. And in Buddhism, people speak about salvation by insight and not by grace. Grace can be interpreted as a kind of insight. Awakening. Awakening is already insight.
Zazen is the formal practice of Zen meditation. It involves certain specifics of practice in order to facilitate the quality of the meditation. It starts with a sitting posture. And I'd like us to do this now. Sit back in your chair, put your rear end against the... It's difficult to sit in these chairs. We don't have cushions for everybody, and so we're going to make do. If you are going to do meditation in a chair, Often a wedged cushion helps a great deal to raise the back of the pelvis, but we can't do that. But so the best solution is to sit to the back of the chair, feet parallel, firmly on the ground in front of you. Sit erect, head erect, ears over your shoulders, eyes either closed or slightly open, but the gaze downward sort of ahead of you, about 10 feet ahead of you. Rest your hands on your lap. Right hand with the palm up first. Second hand, palm up inside the first, and the thumbs touching gently. And that then can go into your lap. And this posture for your hands, your thumb just gently touching, from time to time will remind you that you're still here, if you feel the thumbs touching. During meditation, you can return to your awareness of this gentle touch as a reminder that you are here. Now begin breathing naturally. Notice when the breath is long. Notice when the breath is short. Don't force the breathing in any way. One is not asleep. One is simply gently aware of random thoughts, of feelings in the body, of sounds in the room. But one does not focus attention on any of these. Counting one's breath may facilitate non-thinking thinking. That's what this is called if it works, non-thinking thinking. While breathing naturally, count successive breaths. Count the out-breaths. 1. 2. 3. 4. Then start again, repeating. If one is surprised to have counted beyond 4, simply sigh, "Oh well," and gently start again. So I'd like now to have 5 minutes of Zazen. You're already in the correct posture, so I will sound the gong 3 times to start, and then two strikes at the end to stop. The Buddha found and identified that underlying our awareness of life, there is a universal sense of unease, dissatisfaction, even of suffering, that is called dukkha. Somebody described it recently to me as a broken axle grinding in a wheel with a car running along like this. There are many ways of translating dukkha. Suffering is the one we most often hear in English, but just unease or dissatisfaction often works. Dukkha. He taught that this dukkha, this suffering, arose from our grasping after and holding on to things, from our ignorance regarding the nature of reality, from our ignorance regarding our own true natures, and because we misunderstand the true relationship between ourselves and the world beyond ourselves. He taught that a meditative practice would allow developing the mental skill to reflect carefully and allow a better understanding of the nature of those events that happen to us. If we learn to allow time, enough time of mindful calmness before the emergence, when things happen to us, before the emergence of automatic, inappropriate, spontaneous responses, if we allow time, considered, rational, meaningful ideas and responses will emerge naturally of themselves, avoiding that constant responsing that so often happens that just contributes to continuing the suffering that goes on. I mean, in the West, we always call counting your breath or holding your breath or counting, whatever. But this is built in. I mean, it's real psychology. It works very well. But in the mindfulness practice, we just allow time for some better response to emerge. Not really thought through, but just comes out of us because we really understand underneath. The emotions don't understand. They are automatic. Thich Nhat Hahn has a wonderful teaching regarding the Buddha's approach to suffering, which seems to me well-rooted in modern understanding of human psychology. In his book, No Mud, No Lotus, he teaches that with the tool of meditation, one can learn the nature of one's suffering, can deeply understand it, learn to embrace it. Thereby, suffering can be transformed into joy and growth. Whatever caused the suffering remains real, but it doesn't affect us in the same manner. Let's watch the video, No Mud, No Lotus.
That flower on your path is a wonder. It is a mystery. You cannot explain with your human mind how that flower is there. With mindfulness and concentration, you can get in touch with that flower, and you may get right away the insight that this is something that belongs to the kingdom of God. In the here and the now. You don't have to die in order to touch the kingdom of God. And your body also belongs to the kingdom. Do not have any complex. Your body is a wonder. It is a mystery. So everything that you touch in you and around you, they all belong to the kingdom of God. They are wonders. Not only the lotus flower is a wonder, but the mud that help to produce the lotus is also a wonder. Without the mud, there would not be the lotus. And with the energy of mindfulness, concentration, you can touch the kingdom of God in everything. Not only in the lotus, but in the mud. Because in the kingdom of God, there is no discrimination. Suffering is a kind of mud. Happiness is a kind of lotus. And if we know how to make good use of suffering, we can produce the beautiful lotus of happiness.
Stinkt ganz schön. Smells. Konzentriere dich auf die positiven Aspekte.
So everything inside of you and around you can be seen as a manifestation of the kingdom. The kingdom is available 24 hours a day, and God is available 24 hours a day. In our mind, we have a tendency to discriminate, or discriminate against, we discriminate between mind and matter. And that is why we ask the question whether mind is a product of matter, and so our matter is a product of mind. Materialism say that our mind is a product of matter, and idealism say that what you see as matter, that's only your mind. So they continue to quarrel and dispute with each other just because they use the mind of discrimination in order to look at things. But in the tradition of Buddhism, mind and matter are not two separate entities. Sometimes they manifest as mind, sometimes it manifests as matter. It's like in subatomic physics, the element particle sometimes express itself as a particle, sometimes as a wave. So to say that it is a particle is wrong. To say that it is a wave is equally wrong. It is both. And this sheet of paper, which has the left and the right, and we know that we cannot take the left out of the right and the right out of the left. You cannot come and take the right and go to Bordeaux and the left to go to Toulouse. No, they are always together. You cannot take them out of each other. And that is the teaching of interbeing in Buddhism. Interbeing means you cannot be by yourself alone. You have to interbe with us. The left has to interbe with the right. The left is not the enemy of the right. The left has to lean on the right in order to manifest herself, and the right has to lean on the left in order to manifest herself. So this is the mind of non-discrimination. But if we continue with our mind of discrimination, we distort everything, and we oppose matter to mind, left and right, and so on. And last week we also learned that suffering and happiness, they are not enemies. they enter. Suffering is made of happiness, and happiness is made of suffering. If there is no suffering, there is no happiness. And if there is no happiness, there is no suffering. It's like the lotus flower and the mud. If there is no mud, you cannot grow lotus. And the lotus stay there for some time and become the mud again. So looking into the lotus, you see the mud. And looking into the mud, you see future lotus. So suffering is like that. Someone who has the capacity to go back to himself and listen to his own suffering and look deeply into his suffering, he will be able to understand that suffering inside of him that carries with it the suffering of his father, his mother, his ancestors. And getting in touch with suffering inside helps you to understand your own suffering. And understanding suffering gives rise to compassion. And when compassion arises, you suffer less right away. Because you see the path of transformation and healing. If you have understood the nature, the roots of your suffering, and then the path leading to the cessation of the suffering will appear in front of you. And having seen the path, you are no longer afraid. You know how to make good use of suffering in order to make happiness. It is like the brothers in Plum Village, they know how to make good use of the mud in order to produce beautiful lotus flowers. There are 1 or 2 lotus flowers left in the upper hamlet and the lower hamlet. So one of the things we learned last week is that we need suffering. Suffering can be useful, and we can speak about the goodness of suffering. Because going back and listen and understand our suffering, we give rise to the birth of compassion and love. And when compassion, love is born, we suffer less right away. Suppose you look at someone, even that someone has made you suffer a lot during the past many years. You don't want to look at him or her because every time you look at him or her, you suffer. Because you believe that that person has made you suffer so much. But now with the practice, it becomes different. Because you have already understood your own suffering. That is why you are capable of recognizing the suffering in him, in her. And you understand why such a person suffers so much. And that person suffers so much and does not know how to handle the suffering. That is why his suffering is spilling all over, around. And you are a victim. Maybe he did not want to make you suffer. Just because he does not know how to handle the suffering. That is why he continues to suffer. And because he suffers, you have to suffer. You are the second victim. And he is the first victim of his suffering. So having understood your own suffering, you have compassion, you have insight, and you suffer less. And that allows you to look at the other person. And when you can see the suffering in her, in him, and you understand why that person suffers like that, you are no longer angry at him anymore. And this is the truth. When you look at someone, and if you can see the suffering in that someone, that he is not capable of handling the suffering, you don't blame him anymore. You are not angry at him anymore. Instead, you want to do something and to say something in order for him to suffer less. It means that you have compassion in your heart. And compassion in your heart does not make you suffer anymore.
So understanding of and compassion for one's own suffering can be a foundation for developing compassion in other people. Happiness is not a private, individual matter. Achieving happiness in oneself will affect those people around us. So cultivating the self can also have beneficial effects in the world around and become acts of community improvement. Discerning what is real about life and what is real about the world is a highly sought goal for Zen practitioners. Buddhism recognizes two kinds of truth, two levels of reality. According to conventional truth, we identify and classify the objects, the various objects that we encounter in the world every day. I mean, every one of us. I mean, we see all these objects around us, these people objects, these chairs. We identify them, we give them names, we separate one from another, and so forth. Absolute truth, or ultimate reality, is discernible through insight. And science, too, as a matter of fact. I didn't put that in my text here, but science is another way of getting this kind of absolute understanding of a sort. As we look deeply and see how objects are connected to other objects, and we see that objects themselves are made up of constituent elements, which may combine only when specific conditions appear. In this sense, they no longer stand alone as independent reality. They are interconnected, and their existence depends upon these connections through time and in the present. They do not have a persisting and detached existence. And they have a conditioned reality. That term conditioned is important in Buddhist language. For illustration, this is a very simple illustration, but it should work. Consider objects such as an atmospheric cloud. An atmospheric cloud is comprised largely of droplets of condensed water vapor. A cloud object comes into being when conditions in the atmosphere permit condensations of water vapor. This is spoken as a change of phase in the scientific parlance. The cloud object seems to appear out of nowhere. Subsequently, when conditions are right, fog droplets may coalesce into larger droplets that can fall out as rain under the force of gravity, influence of gravity, let's use that term better. Cloud objects may merge with other cloud objects, forming larger cloud objects. Or under other conditions, cloud objects may quietly disappear into thin air as its constituent droplets disappear, and they evaporate. When seeing the cloud object in an absolute sense, we can realize its fundamental reality as deeply related to and dependent upon both its chemical constituents, water, and the environmental conditions that condition the phase in which water presents itself. It does not take a great step of imagination to recognize that living objects, flowers, woodchucks, individual people, people collectively, also may be seen in a conventional sense as individual objects, or, and I should say, recognized in an ultimate sense as profoundly connected with and dependent on their constituent elements, their present environmental circumstances, their fellow beings, and the historical trajectories that they have experienced. And therefore, they do not have an independent existence or an independent nature in the sense of something that stands alone, by itself. Buddhism applies the term emptiness in describing this ultimate impermanence of normal objects. They're empty. They're empty of independent being. When we first hear about emptiness, we may feel a little frightened. But after pursuing the idea for a while, we see that things do exist, only in a different way than we had been thinking. The beautiful flower does not become empty when it fades and dies. It's already empty in its essence. Looking deeply, we see that the flower is made of non-flower elements: light, space, clouds, earth, and consciousness, to the extent that we are aware of it. It is empty of a separate, independent self. Rather, it manifests its linkage to soil, atmosphere, sunlight, and preceding generations of flower. In Zen, there is very little regard for beliefs and no real dogmas. What is expressed in words is often regarded to have uncertain validity, and certainly is taken only as gestures toward what is reality. Like the finger pointing to the moon is never mistaken for the moon. At least it should not be mistaken for the moon. However, actions in the world by living beings such as humans are a different matter. One's actions are the real expressions of oneself. I'd like to consider the chant now, the Anguttara Nikaya, which we will have on the screen, and I'd like to recite it. Does it come up? Yes. My actions are my possession. My action is my inheritance. My action is the womb that bears me. My action is my refuge. There are also various chants specific to focusing awareness on certain inescapable realities. And next we'll look at the 5 remembrances that are especially poignant in this regard. The 5 remembrances. I am of the nature to grow old. There is no way to escape growing old. I am of the nature to have ill health. There is no way to escape having ill health. I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. All that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature of change. There is no way to escape being separated from them. My deeds are my closest companions. I am the beneficiary of my deeds. My deeds are the ground on which I stand. While we usually recite the 5 remembrances on the occasion of loss, some member of the community. Loss that is firmly in the unavoidable flow of change. Its recitation helps to remind us of this ultimate truth of reality. A living being, a living person, necessarily acts on and is acted upon by its environment and other living beings in it. Many interactions are unbidden and unobserved, such as the chemical exchanges or instinctive responses that characterize a living organism. Intentional action, when directed toward reducing the suffering of oneself or in others, Buddhists call right actions. In recognizing the interactive nature of being alive, Thich Nhat Hanh has chosen the coinage interbeing, which he introduced earlier in his talk. Interbeing. We are not beings, we are interbeings. For humans, intentional actions may be wrong actions or right actions. An action taken to lessening the suffering in oneself or another person, or more generally in the community, or even in the wider world, is called a right action. Each new moment of time provides new opportunities to focus mindful attention toward discerning what would be the appropriate right action right now. As a young monk during the Civil War in Vietnam, this is in the late 40s and early 50s, Thich Nhat Hanh recognized the limitations of a focus exclusively on the amelioration of one's own suffering. There's a tendency when people think about Buddhist meditation and so forth, it's just for myself. Well, to counter that, we've tried to suggest already evidence accounting that, but Thich Nhat Hanh very systematically thought freshly and newly about this. Consider the classic role of the Bodhisattva. You know, the Bodhisattva is an enlightened being who has achieved personal enlightenment. And normally in Buddhist tradition, that enlightened being just sort of disappears into nirvana, doesn't have to worry about anything. But the Bodhisattva says, no, I'm going to stay here and help others. My role is to help others. And so if you consider the role of the Bodhisattva, classic in Buddhist tradition, Thich Nhat Hanh says that is a model. One who has achieved enlightenment and then chosen to undertake right action to alleviate the suffering of others. And so this role can plausibly be applied to someone who undertakes social action to ameliorate the suffering of all parties affected by war or other conflict. Buddhist practice applied intentionally in social situations, Thich Nhat Hanh called at this time engaged Buddhism, and he developed this idea systematically over subsequent years. So let's view video 4 about engaged Buddhism.
Engaged Buddhism, I think, is a relatively recent concept, although I think it's actually been practiced for many years. It is to do with taking our meditation practice into the world and actively engaging with the problems of the world, not using meditation as a sticking plaster to help us de-stress, but actually to use it as a vehicle to actually recognize what is driving those stressors in our environment. It was, I think, two of the key names would be Siddhartha Shivaratna from Thailand, and Thich Nhat Hanh from Vietnam. And they have both written very eloquently about engaged Buddhism as a path, if you like, towards enlightenment, that actually we are a social species. We need to recognize that in our quest for personal development, and that we need to work in a way that makes not only us individually happy, but also is moving towards a greater degree of happiness and sustainability within the wider world in which we find ourselves. And that can be in a peaceful, peacetime environment, such as the issues around global warming and climate change. It can be on an interpersonal level, in which our behaviour impacts on other people, and that's also important. But it can also be in situations of conflict, where we are actually using our practice to inform our response to aggression within the world, and learning to respond in a way that is appropriate and assertive, but not aggression, because we know that aggression feeds aggression, and we need to find other ways of operating.
The Diamond Sutra emphasizes the teaching that we protect ourselves. To protect ourselves, we must work for the well-being of others around us, and actually all other surrounding life and non-life in our environment. Early environmental advocacy from, probably 3,000 years ago. If we pollute the water and the air, the vegetables and minerals, we also damage ourselves. We have to learn to recognize our interbeing with all things that we thought were outside of ourselves. We must dissolve the false boundaries of common understanding. It is this perspective that Thich Nhat Hanh develops in his last book, Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet, which I have here. Here he shows how Zen practice, addressed toward transforming one's own suffering, can also be applied to collective social action toward the suffering of the greater world, of society, and the sky and the land that support us. I thank you for hearing me today. I don't think we have time for another zazen. We've got a couple of minutes, and I will extinguish the chalice at this point. And I will say that we have not passed a basket, but there will be baskets at the doors for people who wish to present a goodwill offering. This is the manner of a normal setting of this sort. We will have a social hour afterwards. As far as I know, there's no coffee available. There is coffee available. That's wonderful. What a wonderful addition I didn't know about. And for the Zoomers, please enjoy your breakout rooms. Thank you very much for hearing me today.